This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Maura Donnelly, and I'm an associate at the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Charlie Greenwald, our usual host, is on assignment. So I am running solo today, but I am so excited about our first guest. He's one that's been here a while, Brad Bumpstead. Welcome.
Been here a while in this room? Or
been around a while in general. Brad is the bureau chief of the Caucus, which is a government watchdog reporting system. And so it sounds like you probably stay pretty busy these days watching.
We do. There's a lot to watch.
Yes, yes. You've broken some incredible and interesting stories. But today we've got a couple topics we want to talk about. First, we want to start with the recent Supreme Court race. Good for Democrats, good for Republicans. Tell us what happened.
Great for Republicans, not good for Democrats. I mean, the marquee race in all of this was Commonwealth Court President Judge Kevin Brobson running for an open Supreme Court seat, and the Democrat running was Maria McLaughlin, who's a Superior Court judge and former Philadelphia Common Pleas Court judge. And it was, really a race where they went at each other in TV ads. Brobson and his supporters more than McLaughlin, who had a lot of touchy-feely ads about, she's one of the people.
McLaughlin made a big issue out of the Brobson ads towards the end. Yeah, that they were
sometimes can be
unethical.
A good issue, Yeah. And the only thing that's not good, I don't think, for voters and all of that is that the bar, due to a complaint, obviously from the McLaughlin group or supporters, had the bar involved that required a change in the ad of McLaughlin's, of Brobson's that was out there. The problem with that is it was secret. I mean, they didn't, they weren't able to disclose and say, well, here's what was said before and here's what was said now, because there was an agreement between the parties.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, what kind of deal is that in an election?
There should be a little bit more transparent.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Wow. That's pretty fascinating. And the amount of money that's spent on those Supreme Court races is pretty mind-boggling as well.
Yeah, several million when we see the final total. And it's part of what critics say is what's wrong with the elective system that we have is judges for these appellate court seats, particularly Supreme Court, have to raise, tons of money, and a lot of that gets raised from lawyers who practice before them or may practice before them in court, which is a bit of a conflict of interest.
So it certainly sounds like
so
one.
They have to recuse themselves each time or what. And on the other hand, people who favor elections say, well, what's merit selection but a political appointment? I mean, you can have a panel that picks the right person, but it comes down to the governor making the choice for who's going to serve, or as in a few states, the legislature appointing the judges. Whoa, how about that here?
I'm not sure that would work well.
No.
I mean, I'm sure they would think it would work well, but
I'm sure they would.
So how far along are we with merit selection as opposed to our current millions of dollars being spent?
Merit selection is stalled, and that even from Pennsylvanians from modern courts, who have been one of the primary supporters of that.
Right.
It's not going anywhere at the moment. It's not dead. Nothing ever really is here. But what's more alive right now, beyond life support, is having regional election of appellate court judges.
How would that work?
Well, it would take time to change the Constitution, which takes approval in 2 successive legislative sessions and voter approval. And so far, they've gone through the legislature 1 round on that. And it's a bill by Russ Diamond that would do it, and it would carve the state up into 7 judicial districts. And obviously, when you try to do that on a map, it means, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia are going to be, one of the, 1 and 2 regions, maybe Allentown. But after that, most of those are going to be Republican districts.
Oh.
So it's something that clearly could be in the Republicans' favor as they look to try to take back the Supreme Court after the huge victories by Democrats in 2015.
Yeah. Wow. We can barely get the reapportionment done. So how are we going to, how are we all going to agree to those districts?
Well, the difference is that, you know, with the constitutional amendment, it doesn't go through the governor, so the Governor Wolf won't be able to veto it.
Okay.
And the Republicans in the legislature will be drawing the maps for that. And, you know, sure, they may get challenged in court, but population is what it is, and I think it might be a little easier to do that.
So speaking of Republican victories, one of the hotly contested and most watched states this past week was Virginia, and they had a pretty big win down there for the Republicans.
It was a barn burner.
Yeah. It was pretty fascinating to watch because it was really neck and neck. And going into Election Day, it didn't seem like they didn't really know how it was going to come out.
Right.
But Youngkin came out ahead, and so did their lieutenant governor and attorney general. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at the map that CNN always puts on about the various counties in Virginia, you had Youngkin winning these red counties in the southern part of the state by huge margins, more than Trump had carried them.
Oh, wow.
And because the way it usually works is, okay, Republicans win there, but when you get to Fairfax, Falls Church, Arlington, you know, the victory disappears there in the Washington suburbs. But the most interesting thing about it is Youngkin was endorsed by Trump, but he didn't run as a Trump candidate per se.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't spurn his endorsement, and he favored a lot of the things that Trump would agree with, but he was not, wearing Trump on his sleeve.
Right.
Which they think, well, that may be a new way for Republicans to win, even in Pennsylvania in 2022. You take the support, but you're not his lapdog.
He's not coming into town for you.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I mean, there's a big difference. I mean, McAuliffe had Kamala, Biden, who else? A whole host of people coming into town in support of him, and it didn't work.
Right, and whether Trump wouldn't come in or it was mutual agreement by
don't
the
come
campaign.
in.
Yeah, I mean, look, and if you're Trump and you say, look, you can win this race if you don't come here to visit. Hey, I think he'd be for that. I think he might not like it. Right.
He might complain a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Now, some are saying that this race in Virginia, the way that it came out, was pretty much a referendum on all sorts of ills in the state. But the school board issue has become a really big issue across the country. What do you make of that with the masking and vaccines, and it's just gotten a little crazy?
Critical race theory is
is
probably the biggest thing driving that. I've never seen anything like it. School boards have always been in the backdrop of elections. It's a thankless job. You run for these, you don't get paid. You take all kinds of flack. The only people who would be most motivated to do it would be parents who have kids in that district.
Right.
But now I've never seen it where it's so explosive. I mean, maybe a little bit with the Tea Party a few years ago, but the people are going after these school board members, and conservative Trumpy candidates are taking over some school boards.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting next year or so to see how that all plays out.
Right.
So, I mean, we can't really let you go without talking about COVID to some extent, which we just covered a little bit. But tell us about Governor Wolf's recent vaccine issue. He's got an incentive. Tell us a little bit about that to try to get people.
What an incentive!
It is an incentive. It makes me want to be a state employee again.
That's right, you were. I forgot about your days in the Senate.
Yeah.
But if for people who work under Wolf, if they don't have their vaccine shot for COVID, or maybe they don't have their second one, he's saying, well, if you get it, we'll give you 5 paid days off. It's been estimated it'll cost about $100 million for this incentive. Now, you could argue that health care for those people would be more than $100 million for if they all got COVID and were on ventilators, right? I don't know how much it would be. But it's just, it does come down to the issue, can you force people to have a vaccine, or do you just bribe people to get a vaccine?
Yeah.
But the first thing a friend of mine said to me is, wow, I just wish I had waited and not gotten the second vaccine when I did. I could get a week off.
Yeah.
I should have held out.
Does it apply to boosters?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that'd be my first question if I had both of my
Yeah, if you
both
had
of my
that.
shots.
If you had
I'd
that.
be running out for a booster at this point.
I think it's primarily to address people who just haven't, anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
Can they be bought off with
Yeah.
5 days?
Well, a lot of states have had some success with some incentives. They've given away lottery tickets, they've done drawings. I mean, this was really early on, and it was very successful. But this one seems a little bit over the top.
What do you think about, mandatory vaccines for healthcare workers?
What do I think?
Yeah.
Well, I think they should have them if they're in the healthcare field and they're dealing with patients who might be immunocompromised on a daily basis.
It makes sense. I mean,
It
it's
does
the
make
one
sense.
area.
It's the only area, I think.
Yeah, I agree with people who, if they, don't want to get the vaccine, okay, for whatever reason, it's different. But if
Right.
you want to work in a nursing home,
Right.
it seems to me you've got to do that or go look for another job.
Right.
But I agree, it's probably the only area. Nursing, if you're in, wards where they would deal with COVID patients too.
I completely agree with that. I really do think it's the one area where they ought to get it. And I think there's been great success in getting healthcare workers vaccinated, some holdouts. And the police too, that's not, well, we could go on and on about different
Police
groups.
is
But
next in line.
yeah, next in line, yeah.
Right.
They deal with the public a lot as well, so.
One question for you is who's going to win the Republican primary for governor next year?
Oh, there's quite a field. Can we list them all? I don't really know.
I'm covering it. I can't list them all because it changes.
Right,
And I haven't looked it up lately, but
right.
But you've got Lou Barletta, and you've got Doug Mastriano. You might have Jake Corman jumping in on it,
Oh, that's interesting, okay.
and a guy named Dave White, who nobody's really heard of, but he's a wealthy businessman from Delaware County who's, I believe, I'm told he's a Trump supporter, and he's willing to put $2 million of his own money into
Ooh,
it.
well, that helps.
Right.
Yeah.
But then also you have a couple Trumpers running, so does that split the
Well,
Trump
we've
vote
got,
to help somebody else?
Charlie Giroux is running, right?
Charlie
yeah,
Giroux is
Charlie
running.
Giroux is running. He's been around a long time. I don't know. Do you have any sense of? I mean, do you think whoever it ends up being, they're going to be running against Josh Shapiro? Do you think that's pretty well set?
That's
yeah,
pretty well set.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, it would have to be a monumental change of something that knocks Shapiro out of it. I just don't see that happening. But I think with the Republican governor's race, I think it depends whether Corman gets in. Not that Corman is, as he, I'm told, had referred to himself meeting with the congressional delegation. I'm somebody who can clear the field. I'm not sure he can do that.
Yeah,
but
that's a big field to clear.
It is, but he is somebody who's it would be a heavyweight in the race.
Yeah. Well, so in our last couple minutes here, let's find out what else you're working on. What else you got going that you can tell us? I know you always have secrets, but
yeah. Well, our bureau is working on more stories about legal fees paid by the legislature that are secretive in a way because whatever documents you first look at doesn't tell you what they're doing or what the lawsuit is about. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple more things along that line that we're doing. And we have a couple more possible stories on legislators who looking at their campaigns spending as well as their expense spending, and are they commingled on any certain days.
So that story, which broke a couple of years ago now, right? The expenses and campaigns, ongoing. Then you're still digging.
We're still digging. I'm not saying absolutely that's going to be a story, but it's a legal story. Will be. There'll be more legal fees, and it's an astronomical amount of money that they pay lawyers, while they already have lawyers on staff, and for each caucus.
So what are they paying lawyers for? I mean, because they do have lawyers. What are?
Well, some are things that we know about. Whether it be a redistricting suit or things that they probably should be paid.
There's some legitimate.
But others are pet projects, sort of legislators who want to sue somebody because of this or that. Not a personal thing, but an issue that they care about. And that's all fine, well, and good, but does the general public care about what that Democratic legislator wants or a Republican legislator? So Angela
And
Columbus.
they're often named as parties to in different lawsuits
They
too,
are.
so they do have to defend themselves. Yeah.
Angela Columbus of Spotlight and Sam Janish, one of our reporters, have combined on that, and it's sort of been an addendum to all the legislative expense stuff that we've done
Oh, great.
till now.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you're really busy.
We are.
And I really hope we can have you back because I just love having conversations with you about politics and politicos and all that sort of thing. So you have so much, you have a wealth of knowledge up
We
in
don't
that
have
head
to
of
come
yours.
back here to talk about it.
Yeah,
Have a
good.
cup of coffee if you
Okay.
want.
Oh, good. That would be good too. That'd be great. Well, thank you so much for being here. We hope to see you again soon.
Okay.
And join us for another segment of Behind the Headlines next.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Hi, welcome back to a new segment of Behind the Headlines. On this segment, we are going to cover a very fascinating and somewhat frightening issue. And we have the perfect guest for us, a new guest, Mr. Jordan Grant, who is the Director of Government Relations for the Pennsylvania Association of Community Bankers. Welcome, Jordan.
Thanks for having me.
It's very nice to have you. You are a first-time guest, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
So as you mentioned, I am the Government Relations Director for PACB. Prior to coming on board with the association, I served as Legislative Director for Representative Seth Grove, who now chairs the State Government Committee for 7 years. I like to say that I was exiled from California, so we had a freeze today in Harrisburg, so that was something new to experience.
Oh, wow, so you have a whole winter to deal with and everything?
So that was, you can imagine, quite the transition for
You're
me,
right.
but yeah. But it's been a great, 12 months serving as Government Relations Director for the association.
Great. That's wonderful. So tell us a little bit about the Association of Community Bankers, because there are several different banking associations in Pennsylvania. What makes you different, and tell us about your organization and what your membership is made of.
Yeah, so our members are generally, they vary in asset size. We have about 68 members across the state, from Erie to Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, South Central Pennsylvania. You're looking at banks that could be as small as 25 million in asset size to well over 3 billion, but generally about $1 billion or less. Viewers will recognize them from seeing them sponsor youth athletics or community events.
Right.
And more recently, from the Paycheck Protection Program, our members did about $3 billion in loans for Main Street recovery, and that saved about 150,000 jobs.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's also very good for every community. What's the advantage of banking with a community bank as opposed to one of the big banks?
So the advantage of community banking is their size, that they're your neighbor. They know you, they're more quick to respond. They try to be as flexible as the laws and regulations allow. So, using Paycheck Protection as a perfect example, you saw a lot of customers go from their bank, which was a larger bank or a credit union, to a community bank, because community banks were quicker to respond to a Paycheck Protection loan and get the money out the door to keep a small business open.
So community banks are in your community. As you said, they're supporting local baseball teams, and they're everywhere.
Absolutely.
No, that's wonderful. So can't talk about banking or banking issues without wondering what the Biden administration is up to with this $600 requirement from the IRS. I don't even know what it is. It's frightening, though. So tell us a little bit about what this requirement is, what it means.
Yeah, so let's take a step back. The administration proposed it back in May as part of their Green Book, or known as their budget proposal. What it's supposed to do is raise about $450 billion for the income tax gap from millionaires and billionaires. How they're supposed to do it is to beef up the IRS and require banks to report on inflows and outflows, so everything coming in and out of your bank account. if you have $600 in your account or if you do $600 worth of transactions in a given year. So as you
In
can
a year?
Yes.
Okay.
So as you can imagine, that it covers every single
Pretty much.
Pennsylvania with a bank account.
Right.
Because of that, it's been widely unpopular. The Joint Committee on Taxation actually found that it's not a billionaire or millionaire tax hike. It's actually on middle-class Americans. Their score released to Congress showed that 65 to 78% of all the money raised would come on individuals with an income of $100,000 or less.
Yeah. So I like to say, what does this mean for me or to me? And I'm not made of a lot of money. I'm far from being a millionaire, but I think I would fall under that category.
Almost every Pennsylvanian would have, but because 63% of Americans opposed the proposal at $600, Congress tried to thread the needle at $10,000, saying that wouldn't affect as many individuals. But again, it's the annual transactions in a given year. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics said 61,000 is the average amount of transactions that an individual has in a given year. So it's still going to impact almost every single Pennsylvanian with a bank account. And it has had disastrous effects already for consumers in Pennsylvania. You're seeing them start pulling money out of their bank accounts. We've seen customers pull out $100,000 out at a given time to less than a couple thousand just to avoid scrutiny, because no one wants the IRS looking into their account without just cause.
Right. So what does this do to banks? I mean, that sounds like a huge reporting requirement in addition to privacy and all sorts of other issues.
Yeah. So for community banks, the problem is twofold. First, it fundamentally alters the relationship with their customer. I mentioned to you earlier that community banks thrive on being your neighbor and having that close tie with their customer. But when community banks are being forcibly deputized under this proposal as the enforcement wing of the IRS, that changes that relationship significantly.
Totally different dynamic.
Yeah,
Completely different.
You've probably thought about before this proposal, your bank in a normal sense. You either liked your bank or it was your bank. It makes you have a distrust of your banking system if they're reporting all your information to the IRS. So you look at that, you're eroding the whole business model for community banking. And when you look, again, using Paycheck Protection as an example, nationwide it was 70 million jobs were saved by community bank loans. They did 47% of the total loans. And when you erode the very business model that they're built on, what would have happened if this had happened a couple years before the pandemic and there was less community banks around? The second aspect of it is added costs. So right now, community banks, they can pay anywhere from 8% or more of their pre-tax earnings just to comply with federal requirements. From reporting suspicious activity to just cash transaction reports to the U.S. Treasury Department. This will significantly increase those costs. We're talking about anywhere from just one bank, an average size bank in our association, if you only had to report on accounts with $10,000 in that account. Not every American has that. You still had 15,000 new accounts that you would have to do reports for everything coming in and everything coming out. And that is a significant increase in cost because they have to change their software. They have to add more privacy notifications to make sure all the information is safeguarded going
Secured,
up. Secured, And that's not even something that the federal government can guarantee. It's a well-known fact that the IRS uses an IT system that's 50 years old. And when you think about it, last year the Department of Defense was victim to a cyber attack.
Yes.
And we're using with the IRS a system that's 50 years old. It's significantly less secure. In 2014, the federal government had Social Security numbers leaked from the Office of Management and Budget. You're talking about the fact that the IRS had an employee voluntarily leak tax information earlier this year. There's a reason why customers do not trust their information going to the IRS.
So, Jordan, what are we going to do about this? What can we do about this?
Honestly, the best answer is coming from consumers themselves. They've been calling Congress ever since this proposal was first announced.
Okay.
Our association has been part of a nationwide effort that's seen 700,000 touches to congressional offices. And we're very proud of the fact that Pennsylvania's had some leaders on this issue. Representative Chrissy Houlihan it was among 20 House Democrats that asked the Speaker to remove this proposal from Build Back Better. That takes real leadership, and we appreciate that. You had Senator Manchin tell the President that this proposal is screwed up. His words, not mine, but we very much agree with that.
Yeah.
So, we're encouraged by the progress, but it's something we're not taking for granted.
Are individual states doing anything?
Yes, so in Pennsylvania, the State House and the State Senate already voted a resolution out urging Congress to not adopt these reporting requirements. They are looking to, in the coming weeks, move this on the floor for a formal vote, which will then be sent to every congressional office, along with the leaders in the House and Senate.
So what else are we, so does this have any legs? I mean, I know it's been, you know, one day it seems like it's not going to pass, and then the next day it's back under consideration. What's the current status of this proposal?
Currently, this proposal has taken a significant hit because of the opposition from Senator Manchin and from moderates like Representative Houlihan.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that it's not going to be enacted. We're very much remaining vigilant on that fact, because honestly, you see aspects of this proposal come to and out of the bill. So an example being paid leave was something that was reported out of the bill, and as of last night, it was added back in. The House is moving to vote on Build Back Better later today or soon, and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So this is really fluid still. So it's honestly something that consumers can't take for granted until the deal is finalized.
So it might not be $600, but it could be some other number too. So I still have to stay on top of it.
Absolutely. And again, the one thing I would iterate is it's a middle class problem that this reporting requirement ends up hitting.
So this is one of the biggest issues you're working on in our last minute here. Tell us what else PACB has going on. What are you concerned about, or what are you working on?
So we're also monitoring changes at the federal level regarding cannabis banking. So that was actually loaded into the National Defense Authorization Act. If you're wondering what the tie-in, you're probably, like everyone else.
Really?
So you have that. You have ties into what's going to happen with cryptocurrency and whether or not banks should engage with that, or if they're going to treat crypto brokers like a bank. That's a new regulatory proposal coming out. So we're monitoring both of those issues very closely.
And the cannabis issue is big because cannabis, it's becoming legalized, but they can't find bankers who will work with them. Is that correct?
It's federally illegal, so technically
Okay.
you could be hit by a RICO challenge if you had an asset where you loaned money. You could be tied into any type of formal criminal conspiracy, along with just losing the collateral of the loan. So without federal protections, it's a lot harder for a bank to serve a legal business, whether set up under state law, like Act 16 of 2016, or any additional, such as what the governor's proposed for recreational marijuana.
Great. Where can people find more information about community banks and about your organization? What's your URL?
The best place to go would be pacb.org, but additionally you can look for us on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn
good.
for additional updates.
So you have a robust social media effort going on.
Yes,
that's
it's grown
great.
significantly.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great news. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It's been wonderful to meet you. You can tell Kevin Shivers we missed him, but we suitable, wonderful fill-in. So thank you for being here today, and we hope to have you back soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us on Behind the Headlines.